And so we now get on with part 2 of Race 2 in the 1000 miles. I really don't know how many miles I've driven up to this point in this race, but I think I have driven pretty far, because I drove over 300 miles in the Nürburgring race. And since I'm already halfway through this race, as I now overlap the Honda S800 for the 5th time, I think it's going to be around lap 60 when my fuel tank is going to be near enough to empty. But still, at this point, for me to run as many as 60 laps, potentially, on this fuel tank, that is definitely longer than what I thought I was going to run with this thing. I think the fuel conservation with this car has been very impressive for just this sort of event, because I have practically driven miles and miles up to this point of the event, and I just feel like my car is already doing everything it's supposed to do. So, we are now at the end of lap 51, and I'm now about to put the Alfa Romeo 4 laps down. Had to get the elbows out a little bit there, but I could see he was weaving a lot, so I kind of knew I had to clear him, or else I would just be stuck behind him and I would probably have to bump him out the way. Which, in all honesty, is not how I wanted to do that. I think I probably gave him a side rub just as I was trying to clear him. But again, I think as long as it's not intentional contact most of the time, then I think you should be fine. I mean, as they say at the end of the day, rubbing's racing, so at least that's the way I've understood it. You're basically okay as long as you don't do it very often. But if you do it a lot, then eventually your opponents will retaliate against you. I should know that because I have seen moments of intentional payback occur during certain races. There are definitely moments of revenge that do occur in racing, although most notably they occur in NASCAR, not in most other sports, because the cars really aren't durable enough to take those sorts of hits that stock cars can take when it comes to getting revenge. But anyway, here we are for the second half of Opera Paris, and if anyone is still watching me at this point and is actually paying attention to both parts of this race, then I would really appreciate it if you could give me intervals for how many times I have overlapped each of my opponents. I know I've overlapped the Alfa Romeo 4 times and the rest of the field 5 times now. Well, at least 5 times. And I have also overlapped the Fiat, I think at this point of the race, 10 times. And I know that's probably going to be a lot more because, well, the 500 is basically just being the field filler, because of just how hilariously slow he really is compared to the rest of us. As I am now about to put the Mini Marcos 6 laps down. And less than a second off my personal best lap time. And I do manage to overlap the Marcos again, this time putting him 6 laps down from what I can remember. And we head through the bus stop again. No real point in downshifting there because you're not really scrubbing off enough speed to downshift there for that bus stop. You're basically just free to do whatever you want through that corner, more or less. I also just noticed we are now over an hour and a half into this race. So I reckon Opera Paris is probably going to be the shortest of the bunch, from what I can see. I mean, just in terms of length, it would seem as though Opera Paris probably is going to be the shortest of these 4 races. Nürburgring is probably going to be the longest, but I think Le Mans is probably going to be somewhere in between, because we are doing less than 100 laps around Monaco and only 35 laps around Le Mans, which for a course of that size is still a lot. I don't know how many miles I'm going to drive in this, but I think it's probably going to be near enough to 1,000 by the time we're done here. That's what I think it's going to be. So yeah. So we are 54 laps into race 2, and this is now part 2 of that race. And at this point, we are not looking like we're going to lose all that much when it comes down to our next pit stops, as I now set a new personal best sector split in sector 2. We'll try and see if we can improve on that, as I now overlap the Fiat for, I think that's now the 11th time I've overlapped him. So the Fiat is now 11 laps down from what I can recall. It would definitely be interesting if I was going to set a new personal best lap time. And now I don't think that's going to happen because I hit the inside wall. And I was 3/10 off. Probably because the 500 got in the way, and also because, well, I was on course to having a new best lap time, but the 500 kind of ruined it. But you know what? It's fine. I've had much worse moments with back markers. That is just something that happens. It's fine. I'm not really that salty about it, I'm just saying it is what it is. And that's all I really care about. Just making sure that my car is fast, and that I'm also not going to have too much trouble with traffic whilst I do it. And this time I go a little faster. And there are no back markers in my way this time, so providing I get this entry right, we should be on course to potentially setting a new best lap time. If I get this right. But we'll see. Don't want to go too deep this time. Okay. Get it right on the elevation change. And through the final left-hander. And I now set a 1 minute 39 flat. So that is now my new best lap time for the race so far. So I think once I get onto the soft tyre stint, that's when I could very well be running potentially 1:37s in terms of how fast I think my lap is going to be. As I was slightly losing my breath again. And my tank is near empty, so this probably is going to be the pit stop where I will have to refuel again. I have now put the Honda S800 6 laps down, I believe. I know the VW, the Honda, and the Marcos are pretty much all on the same lap. And I still have another... And I still have another 3 laps to run on this stint by the end of this one. But we'll see how we go. Yeah. This corner is very counterclockwise, so you have to be ready for it as you head through it. Then if you can manage to get a good enough exit out of here, then you should be able to get a decent lap time. Also, something else I just realised is that pointy statue right there, is that pointy thing right there, that is a monolith. I know that because I recently watched a video to do with a monolith. That's basically what I think that is. That pointy statue there. I mean, it's either that or it's a monument. But either way, I definitely think it's a monolith, because I recently watched a video about monoliths. But anyway. 2 laps to go on this stint, as we are heading towards the end of what is now stint number 4. The fuel tank is close to being empty, so I think I'll probably put in about half a tank of fuel, and then I think that should be enough to get me to the end. And yep, that actually took longer than I expected to. That actually took longer than I expected for me to hit that wall again. Although I knew it was probably going to happen again when I was on the worn tyres. So I think that was probably what the case was there. I think because I was on worn front tyres, I was inevitably going to hit the wall on the outside because my car understeered with the excessive tyre wear. That was probably going to happen either way. I don't think I would have been able to avoid that on worn tyres. And I think that's fine, as the replay is now finished recording after 1 hour and 41 minutes in this race. And also at the 14-minute mark in the second part of this race. And clipping the walls in some places, but not too many places at the moment. And just really trying to make sure that I keep my ride off the walls as I go a bit wide there. And at the moment, things seem to be going okay, from what I can see. So we should be approaching lap 60 anytime now at this point. And god damn it, I hit that same wall again. But at the very least, I was able to countersteer enough to not go into the right side wall. Which in all honesty does surprise me. But anyway. So we're now 59 laps into this race. We still have another 36 laps to go. As this is where my pit window opens and also where my fuel stop window opens. I think I probably only need about half a tank to really get to the end of this race. I know because my fuel mileage has been really good up to this point. I know the fuel I really need for this is not too much. I basically just need to make sure that prematurely I just get to the end. And then after that, well, it's basically Bob's your uncle. And I won't have to stop in for fuel again. So my worn tyres are pretty much in the red zone once again. That basically means they are pretty much worn out at this point. And the other reason I know that is because, well, I recently understeered on this corner exit here, and this time I just avoid it, so I prevent the same mistake from happening a third time around, as we are continuing our fight to get as many laps out of these tyres as we can. And the worn tyres are not helping me stay on the pit entry line, and this time around I will pit. Still very much me doing the driving because, well, I want to. And we've now completed 60 laps. So I think I only need about half a tank of fuel for this. So I think I'll get up to about 50. And that should be enough to get me to the end of this. So I only need to do 2 more stints on the hard tyres. And then for the rest of this, I can just run on the soft tyres. Because I am convinced in saying that the track surface is not abrasive enough to wear out my soft tyres as quickly as the Nürburgring did. I was probably about, say, 13 minutes into my final stint at the Nürburgring before tyre wear became a real issue. But I think this time around that's not really going to be a problem because, well, unlike the Nürburgring, this track is a lot smaller than the Nürburgring. And it's also much easier to work your way around and keep your car on track because, well, there are basically barriers on both sides. So you basically know that you're not leaving the track. Unless your car flips over somewhere on the course. But in all honesty, I don't really see that happening. So, you know. Anyway, I'm now putting the Honda S800 a 6th lap down as I try to get the elbows out on the inside, and that's what I do. My lap times for most of this have been pretty consistent, and I have been setting some real bangers of laps to really keep myself up front, and that's what seems to be working out for me so far. Although I will have to budge my chair in a minute because it's actually going outwards at the moment. I'm not saying I'll pause the race, but I think when I get up to that straightaway, that's when I'll probably budge myself in again. Because I may need it. I probably needed about half a tank to really get to the end of this race, because the fuel conservation was just so much better than I thought it was going to be for this one. So I've budged my chair in again, and hopefully, if it's possible, my neck will not be irritating me as much, because I have my fleece wrapped around my neck, and I also have my other bedside pillow behind my back as well. So hopefully, as I'm leaning forwards, I do have enough comfort to nurse my back and neck pain, because I do this while sitting in a desk chair. So we are now pretty much 2/3 of the way there, or we will be by the time we get to the end of this lap. We'll have only 32 laps to go after this one, and then we'll pretty much be right where we need to be, which is continuing to overlap the field and still continuing to be quick. As I now put the Mini Marcos 7 laps down, and it looks like I'm going to put the Fiat either 12 or 13 laps down. I think that's now the 13th time I've overlapped him, so yeah, it's safe to say the Fiat is basically nowhere in this championship compared to everyone else. I think the Marcos has now overlapped him as well. So I think it looks like from here we are not really going to expect too much. And keeping it nice and cool on the corner exit, and only 0.8 off on my best overall lap that time around. So we're now on lap 64, and we are an hour and 50 minutes into the event. Still 4 laps ahead of the Alpha, but I think this might be where I put him 5 laps down, because my car is just that much quicker. Oh god, okay. It's alright, it's fine. We hit both sides of the wall, but we lived. And now I have to make sure that I overlap the Alfa Romeo. Who is right up ahead of me. And I gain a slipstream, and that now puts him 5 laps down behind me. So I have now overlapped the field at this point of the race 5 times. So the Alfa Romeo is now 5 laps down, the Mini Marcos is now 7 laps down, and I think the Volkswagen at this point is also going to be 7 laps down from what I can see, as the VW now comes in for his next stop, whichever one this is. I think this might be his 3rd. So I've now overlapped him 7 times up to this point, so sorry, yeah, that's right, yeah, 6 times. Okay, I'm getting confused. 7 laps, yeah. I just remembered that The VW is on the same lap as both the Honda and the Marcos. I'm pretty sure he is now 7 laps down at this point of the event. So, yeah. So I've put most of the field now precisely 7 laps down. No wait, hold on. I need to rethink that. The Alpha is now 5 laps down, and I think the rest of the field is now, I think, a lap behind the Alpha, at the least. So yeah, I think they're now 6 laps down at this point, if I remember correctly. I think the last time I thought about this, they were 6 laps down. So the rest of the field is at least 1 lap behind the Alfa Romeo. So the Alfa is 1 lap up from 2nd to 5th. And well, the Fiat 500 at this point, well, I have to say he is probably either 11 or 12 laps down. Because the Fiat is just basically going at a snail's pace. So yeah, I think that's right. So the Alfa Romeo is 5 laps down. Then the Honda, the Volkswagen, and the Mini Marcos are all 6 laps down. Actually, the Marcos, yeah, I was right before. The Marcos is 7 laps down because he pits before both the VW and the Honda. So the VW and Honda are 6 laps down, and then the Marcos is now 7 laps down. I think that's right. I don't know if anyone is going to finish before I reach the finish line, but I do have a feeling that from what I can see with my lap times up to this point, I would say we are doing pretty well with how closely monitoring we are with the AI. Had to step on the brakes there because I was trying to have a sip from my cup, but that didn't work. I was trying to see if I could actually get a sip from my cup. And yep, I've gone too deep, and yep. I knew that was going to happen. So we're less than 2 hours into the race now. We should have more than enough fuel to get to the end of this race because of how good the fuel conservation has been up to this point. So I think I actually picked a pretty good car in terms of fuel mileage, from what I can see. A fast one, of course, but still a car that I knew was going to be good on fuel mileage, which is ultimately what this one turned out to be. And for that, I'm thankful. Also, there was actually one time where the Monaco Grand Prix did used to run for 100 laps. You quite literally had to do 100 laps around Monaco at one time. Up until the late 60s, following the fatal crash of Lorenzo Bandini in, I think it was 67. That was the last time they ran a Monaco Grand Prix for 100 laps, and then I think it was after that when they shortened the distance to 80 laps, and then they were basically just swapping and changing the distance of Monaco before they eventually settled with 78 laps. I couldn't tell you when exactly they did that, but it was probably somewhere either in the 90s or the 2000s when they settled for 78 laps, with the current Monaco Grand Prix distance that we still see today. I think it was probably 2000 when they settled with and here comes the Fiat again. But yeah, I think it was around the early 2000s when they eventually settled with 78 laps around Monaco. The King of Monaco, by the way, is Ayrton Senna because he's won there 6 times. Graham Hill used to be the king, but Ayrton Senna took his place as the King of Monaco because he won there for the 6th and final time in 1993, which ultimately made him the winningest driver at Monaco. And that's a record that I don't think any other driver has managed to equal yet. Still more than 30 years on from when Senna set the mark, and we are now on lap 69. Nice. So we are now running a nice lap around Opera Paris. Although I doubt this is going to beat my personal best time. I think my tyres might have a little too much wear to realistically make that sort of charge. Would be nice if I could, but I don't think it's really going to be an improvement on my previous best. I don't think I really have the tread, let alone the grip to do it, from what I can see. But anyway, yeah. Yeah, 56.3. Somehow I don't think that's going to improve on my previous best time. I think it's going to be at least a few tenths off, unless I absolutely nail it through this final cornering section. But I will give it a try, just to see if I can make up for last time. And I don't think that's going to be the case, because I'm on the curbs too much. Okay, and how far off am I going to be? 6 tenths off. Okay, that's fine. So we've got 26 laps to go now here at Opera Paris. I am 5 laps ahead of the Alfa Romeo, then 6 laps ahead of both the Honda S800 and the Volkswagen Karmann Ghia. And then it's the Mini Marcos in 5th, who is still currently 7 laps down, and I think it is the Fiat 500 that is now, I would say, I think 14 laps down if I'm not mistaken at this point of the race. I could be wrong, but I think he is 14 laps down by now, because I've overlapped him that many times that it's honestly just really hard to know for sure if I can keep up. So I now put the Honda S800 another lap down. I think that's now the 7th time I've overlapped him, unless that's the 8th. Now I'm pretty sure this has got to be 7 at this point. And so my times continue to be good. So got another 5 laps to run on this stint, and then afterwards we should have one more stint left to do on this set of sports hard tyres. We should have one more stint to do on the hards, and then afterwards we can switch over to the softs. As I now put the mini Marcos, I think that's now the 8th lap. He is now behind me, and he's less than a lap behind both the VW and the Honda, so I think it's the VW that's running in 3rd. So I would say he has to be a lap behind them because he is not going as long on his tyres as the Honda and VW seem to be doing. In other words, he seems to be wearing out his tyres more than they do. So the Marcos is now 8 laps down, and in just a moment the Honda and VW will both be 7 laps down. So, getting past the VW once again, seems like the tyre conservationist is doing a really good job of holding on to 3rd at the moment, as I have now put him 7 laps down. And we are now past the 2-hour mark, something that I never even noticed. And I am 37 minutes into this part of the video. So, still got another 20 plus laps to go, but I only have 2 more pit stops to make, so I think we should be in a good position from what I can see, the way things are currently going. I almost tapped the wall there. And I have now put the Fiat 500 15 laps down up to this point. So up to this point of the race, the Fiat is now 15 laps down, with the Alfa Romeo still 5 laps down. The VW and Honda are both precisely 7 laps down, and the Marcos I think is now 8 laps down, from what I know. There's still plenty more lapping here to do. I really don't know if I can realistically keep up with the amount of times that I overlap the AI in the 24-hour events, unless it's second place that I see. But as for the rest of the field, well, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna have enough cognitive awareness to really keep up with the lap ticker as to how many times I overlap them, because it's probably going to be a lot, from what I can see. So 450 miles is what we've now driven, and we are now just 22 laps away from reaching the end of this race. This is definitely going to be less than 3 hours long from what I can see, because of my fuel mileage strategy, or because of my fuel mileage longevity strategy that has served me well here, and given me basically a whole host of points and money, as I am just continually trouncing the field and continuing to just be about as nonchalant towards the races as I can possibly be. Because I know that when it comes to endurance racing, there's not really much room for competition. Unless it comes down to the car that you use, and you make it good enough to win. So, it looks as though I will put the Alfa Romeo 6 laps down after my next pit stop. I have another lap to run on this set of boots as I brake early and also brake for the corner as well so I don't steer into the outside wall. And so we continue to hold on to our lead. So we've only got 21 laps to go now. I think we're pretty much well on course to winning this race by a big margin. So 21 laps to go here at Opera Paris. And then once we are done here, we can then move on to our next race on the grind. And that will be Monaco. Although one thing that should be mentioned about Paris is actually in the north of France, not the south of France. And I think there is a reason why you will see Paris being pretty close to Le Mans. Because Le Mans, a lot like Normandy, is in the north of France. And of course, if a lot of people really need to know what Normandy is all about, well, there's plenty of evidence to suggest what it's really known for. Or what it's mostly remembered for. And I don't just refer to the Normans and William the Conqueror. But you know, it's fine. I do have quite an interest in history, but sometimes I just like to put in those occasional quips. But yeah, there is the other thing with Normandy, aside from those two things, that pretty much everyone knows about. And I forgot to pit. Oh well, I'm just gonna have to go for another lap on this set of boots. Or possibly another lap as well, maybe. No, I definitely need to pit this lap. I don't think my tyres are going to withstand another lap on this cobblestone surface, or should I say concrete surface. There is a difference between driving on concrete and driving on tarmac. And I think the main difference comes down to the road surfaces. But yeah, either way, I think a lot of things in France normally get their attention in the north of the country than they do in the south of the country. I mean, unless you're talking about either Marseille, Monte Carlo, or even, well, what else is there? Oh yeah, or Circuit Paul Ricard. then there's not really much else aside from those things that you can really see in the south of France, aside from Monte Carlo. Because, well, Marseille technically is the neighbouring county of France to Monte Carlo. At least I think it is. And so, 76 laps are now complete. I went a little bit longer on that stint than I was planning to, but that's fine, because, well, I got distracted. But either way, it's okay, because there's no real changes in the strategy. I'm just continuing to do what I do best, which is basically put laps on the field and just continue to very much show how I am so good at just overlapping the AI. I did also recently head over to a coffee shop in Marseille. I thought they actually gave us some really good coffee over there. It's probably some of the best coffee I think I've ever tasted. I can't tell for sure over what exactly the place is called, but I know it's in Marseille County. If you're wanting to look for, well, the coffee shop. But either way, I definitely recommend heading over to Marseille if you're looking for a quality coffee or something. I think it's really nice. I have been to France a few times, but I've never been to Paris. I think the closest I really came to Paris was when I went to Disneyland over there, which basically is our equivalent of Disney World, to those of you who don't know. We call the theme parks Disneyland, but if you're in America, then you know it as Disney World. I think they also call it Disney World in Canada as well, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, Disneyland Paris was basically the closest I got to actually being in Paris. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Disneyland in Paris is just outside the city of Paris. Even though, from what I remember, I think Disney World is in the same place as where Disney is located, which I think is in California. I don't know for sure, but I think that's where it is. But yeah, I'm still yet to actually go to Paris. It's one of those places that I do have on my to-do list, but I still have not been there yet. But anyway, so we should have 17 laps to go now. So on to lap 79, as I now put the Fiat 500 16 laps down. So I think I'm probably going to overlap the Fiat, I would say, at least 19 times by the time we're done here. Possibly more. The way things continue to play out. So I'm definitely going to beat the Alfa Romeo by at least... Oh, I overlapped him again. Okay. So I think I'm probably going to beat the Alfa Romeo by at least 7 laps. as soon as we're done here. Because my fuel mileage is just that much better than the AI. And that is why I have just been sifting through this like a surgeon and just accurately pinpointing my car where it needs to be. So 6 laps is how much I now lead by over the Alfa Romeo. I won't know what the results are until we get to the end of the race because, well, there is no leaderboard display. But I think I have counted enough positions now and laps to know where the rest of the field is running. So the Fiat 500 is now 16 laps down. The Mini Marcos is 8 laps down. And then the VW and Honda are both 7 laps down so far. And the Alfa Romeo, who is leading, is 6 laps down behind me. Leading amongst the AI, I mean. Hopefully I did not confuse you. Hopefully I did not confuse you with my wording there. So we've got another 15 laps to go here at Opera Paris. I am pretty sure we should be on our way to another easy win from what I can see. The Honda S800 has now overlapped the Marcos. So the Marcos is now going to go 9 laps down. As I get the elbows out to clear him. So the Marcos is now 9 laps down. And the Honda S800, from what I can see, he will be 8 laps down at this point of the race. I will say that both the Honda and the VW have done a pretty good job of conserving their tyres, which is partly the reason why they have been just so damn good at outlasting the Marcos. I figured that is something I should mention. So we're doing really good at the moment. So we should be 81 laps into this one, and we'll have another 9 laps to do on this set of boots before we switch over to the soft tyres for either our final 4 or 5 laps of this race. Basically, to further certify the already dominant pace that we have. Basically. But the sooner we get halfway home, the sooner we might just be able to get this done before the middle of next week, because that is when I go away. Although I will upload the first 2 races in this championship before I go away. The other 2 races, they probably won't be uploaded until after I am back from my 2-week vacation, because I am heading down south again. Although I'm not going to say where. But anyway. Yeah. So, still got another 8 laps to run on this set of boots, and then we can switch over to the grippiest set of boots, that being the softs. It's probably going to take us over 2.5 hours to finish this race, so I think it's probably going to be less than an hour's time under what it took for us to finish at the Nürburgring. Although the Nürburgring, of course, is a much longer track than this one. So you probably would have expected the race to be longer anyway. In terms of laps. But that's only because the Nürburgring is basically much longer than this course in terms of distance. So we've got 13 laps to go here at Opera Paris, and then after that I can basically just do what I do best, which is do whatever it takes to improve on my best lap times. So we are not too far from the end now. I think it's going to be somewhere over 2 hours and 40 minutes by the time we're done here. That's how long I think it's going to take. And at this point, I really don't see anything that is going to stop me from winning this. As I am now less than an hour into this part of the video, so probably by the middle of lap 85 is when I'll reach the 1 hour mark on this video, because I am recording these races in 2 separate parts to make sure that I have an easy enough job of editing. Since I am still not streaming yet, it's hard to determine for sure if whether or not I can really do this. But even though my fuel tank is running low, I might get a little bit more fuel just so I make sure I get to the end, but I think I should have enough to reach the end. Even then, of course, if my tank is going to be near empty by the time we're done here. So the Fiat will now go 17 laps down as he blocks me again, but that's fine. It's just his pace is not anywhere close to mine, unfortunately. So I've now put the Fiat down 17 laps. Unless it's 18. But whatever. I am still keeping myself in a relatively good position, and I still have another 6 laps to go on this stint after this one, as I am closing in on the 1 hour mark for this video, because I am recording these races in 2 halves. And okay, so we are 84 laps in and we still have another 11 laps to go, as we are at 470 miles driven in the Jag. And now clearing the VW Carmen gear for, I think, what is now the 8th time. He gets a ton of oversteer as I overlap him. The AI can be pretty stupid sometimes, and they don't exactly move out the way easily sometimes. Sometimes you basically have to get the elbows out to get past them, or you basically just have to wait for them to make a mistake for you to then basically clear them if you're overlapping them. So the VW calming gear, I think, is now 8 laps down, although there is no leaderboard to really tell us what the running order is. But I am trying to count up the amount of times I have lapped the field in this race before we get to the end. My fuel tank might be low, but I think I might just have enough fuel to get to the end. I know this fuel tank is very durable, so I think it probably is worth a gamble to see if I can get to the end of this race on this tank. I refueled at lap 60, and I have now been on this load of fuel for 25 laps. Going 26 once we get through the rest of the stint. So, yeah. We are less than 2.5 hours into this race, and it looks like from here there is not going to be much more in terms of on-track action. So I set a 56 flat through sector 2. I will run these tyres for another 4, maybe 5 laps if I really feel like it. Of course, if I run them for 5 laps, then it technically means that I would only have to run 4 laps on the softs and they would still be in good condition by the end of the race. I think that's also a gamble I could consider taking if I really wanted to, because then I'll be able to go balls out with the car for the rest of the race, with no concerns for tyre delamination. So I should be 7 laps ahead by the time we get to the end of this one. The Alpha is just up ahead of me again. So this is going to be where I now put him a 7th lap down. And I think that will probably be the last time I overlap him, unless my pace for the rest of the race just really increases once I put on the friggin' soft tyres. I think that's probably what it'll be, as I set a 55.9 through sector 2, and that was a little too fast there for that left-hander, but I still went for it anyway. I think I probably will go another 4 laps after this one, because I noticed I could actually take these tyres out for 16 laps. And then basically after that, for the rest of the race, I can basically just go about as hard as I want. I'm pretty sure I should have enough fuel to make it to the end. And I was only 600ths off beating my best lap time that time around. It probably also helped to say that the Alfa Romeo did get out the way when I was overlapping him. The AI will be giving sometimes in terms of their positions if you let them give it to you, but other times they won't be quite as giving, which will lead to them making mistakes. If you have a faster car, as I have now put the Mini Marcos either 9 or 10 laps down. Yeah, this has got to be 10 now. So the Mini Marcos is now 10 laps down. The Fiat 500 up to this point is probably, I think, either 16 or 17 laps down at this point, unless I see him again. I think it currently stands at 16, but it'll probably be 17 by the time we get to the end of this. And my fuel tank is running low, so technically I would be taking a gamble on a fuel load that might not make it to the end. But I think I should have enough fuel to get to the end. I might give myself a little more juice, just so I can make sure I get to the end, as I overlap both the Honda S800 and the Fiat, putting the Honda now 9 laps down, and the Fiat 500 18 laps down. I think is what it is up to this point. It's either 18 or 19 laps down. I think it's probably 18. So, got another 2 laps on this stint, and then I think we should be good. I think I'll conserve a little fuel here by short shifting, because I have established that is one way you can maintain your fuel mileage. My tyres are not going to be useful for much longer, but that's also why I'm short shifting for probably these next 2 laps. Just so I have enough fuel in reserves in case if I do run out before the end. So going to do another 2 laps on this stint, and then for the rest of this I can basically just give myself basically a litre of gas, and then I think that should be enough to get me to the end. I can pretty much afford to play with the system any way I want, but I'm still convinced in saying that I can get to the end. It's going to be tight, but I think I can get to the end on this tank of fuel if I do run out before the end, because my fuel mileage has just been that good. So we're over 2.5 hours into this race, and I should also mention that as for this video, we are also well over an hour into it, as I just noticed. And I set 1 minute dead in Sector 2 on this lap. Better do one more lap around, and then my soft tyres should have more than enough time to get rubbered into the track. I think my fuel load should be enough to get me to the end. So I'm going to do one more lap on this stint, and then afterwards I will switch tyres. So we're 90 laps in, 5 laps to go now. It'll be at the end of lap 91 where I pit in for my final set of boots. I can pretty much afford to do what I want at this point. I have a 7 lap advantage over the rest of the field, so it really doesn't matter what happens from here on out. I'm still going to overlap the field by a long way, as I am 7 laps clear of the Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint 1600. So, we've got 4 more laps to go after this one, and I'm now 7 laps clear of the Alfa Romeo, so I think it's probably going to stay that way, the way things are looking. We will know the results by the time we get to the end, as we are now heading up to 2 hours and 38 minutes on the ticker. And so, we will make our 6th and final stop here at Opera Paris. A race itself which will take less than an hour shorter. And switching to the softs, because I can now do that. I am strongly convinced in saying I should have more than enough fuel to get to the end, so I am not refueling the car again. I'm strongly convinced in saying I do have enough to make it to the end, because fuel mileage is one thing that this car is pretty good at, and I trust it. So our car is going to be much faster now, because we are on that set of soft tyres. And that is how we will finish this race. I am going to be cutting it close on fuel, but because we're not using a turbo, because we're not using a car that has a turbo, I think fuel mileage should be just what we need in order to give ourselves a heroic charge to end off this race. And taking a sip of water from my bottle. If you heard any slurping through the microphone, that's what it was. You do have to stay hydrated for these things, and my soft tyres should get rubbered in pretty quickly. I think this is probably going to take me less than 2 hours and 50 minutes to get this second race out the way, so it'll be at least 50 minutes less time than what it took to finish the race at the Nürburgring. So here we are now for the last 3 laps, as I set a sub 2 minute time, changing from hard tyres to soft tyres and also not refueling. I'm up to 484 miles driven up to this point, now 485, so I think we're probably going to get another 6 miles in by the time we're done here, because this course is less than 6 miles long over 3 laps. So I think we're probably going to hit 490 by the time we're done here. So the running order after 93 laps is that I am 7 laps clear of the Alfa Romeo Giulia. I am also 9 laps clear of both the Volkswagen Karmann Ghia and the Honda S800. I am 10 laps clear of the Mini Marcos, and I am currently 18 laps clear of the Fiat 500F. I think that's right. But that doesn't really matter now, because I can go balls to the wall for basically the rest of this race. Really wanted to make sure I didn't get it wrong there with that sudden elevation change. And I do now improve on my best lap time with a 38.8, as I am now going to put the Volkswagen Karmann Ghia either 9 or 10 laps down. Pretty sure it's going to be 9 laps by this point. I don't think anybody else should get in the way for the rest of this. And I went too deep, but that's okay. I could get myself a time in the high 137s potentially, if I really get the hammer down. I have the grip to do it, it's just a matter of knowing if I can go fast enough to get there. But we'll wait and see. As my sector split is a 55 flat, so we're definitely going to improve on this lap from what I can see. And on the brakes again, for the left-hander, you basically have to tap the brakes to get through there at speed. And no slipstream from the AI. I think I shouldn't have any problems here getting through the rest of this race. I've got more than enough fuel to get to the end, so refueling was not a problem from what I could see. And now we begin our final lap, as I set a time in the low 137s, as I would have guessed. I knew my soft tyres were going to be quick, and I think this is where I will now put the Fiat 500 19 laps down. He runs a little wide, I go around him. Looks like my best lap time for this race is probably going to be a 1 minute 37.2, unless I can make up for that mistake I made earlier on. As I hit 96 heading into the chicane, almost hitting the outside wall. Was probably a little bit wide there on that corner entry into the hairpin, but we'll see if whether or not that affects us. And we've now set a 54.4, so we could be on track to potentially improving on our previous best, although I did go a little bit wide there through that corner, so maybe not. You really have got to nail it through that left-hander. It's basically a flick if you can get through there with enough speed. It's going to be close on my fuel, but I know fuel conservation is one advantage I have with this car. I don't think I'm going to beat my previous best lap time, but I am going to be close. I was 0.3 off. But there we go. And yep, I was right with the running order. So I win in the end by 7 laps, and it took me 2 hours and 45 minutes to win that race. The Volkswagen Karmann Ghia finished third, 9 laps down. Then it was the Honda S800 fourth, also 9 laps down. The Mini Marcos finished 10 laps down. And it was the Fiat 500 who in the end finished 19 laps down. So those are your standings now after 2 races, as that took me 2 3/4 hours to get through Opera Paris. So basically less than an hour compared to what it took to finish at the Nürburgring, as we are now 300 grand up. So these are your standings now after 2 races. 20 points to me, 12 points to the Alfa Romeo, 7 points to the Volkswagen Karmann Ghia, 6 points to the Mini Marcos, 5 points to the Honda S800, and only 2 points to the Fiat 500. Because, well, he is basically running at a snail's pace. But anyway, this is now our replay saving, because I figured I had to do this to get my thumbnail evidence. And so, there we go. another replay is being saved, as this has taken me just over an hour and 20 minutes to get in part 2 of this race. Basically the second 45 laps compared to the first 50 laps. But anyway, there we go. So 2 races and less than 500 miles in to 1,000 miles. And next time we will be heading to Monaco for round 3, coming in the next episode.